How's it going, guys? Welcome to, if you can't tell by my lack of roof, another Miata. Now this is an NC generation Miata. This is owned by my buddy Alec, and it has a few choice modifications that really make a Miata shine, very similar to those of the ND that we drove recently. And I just wanted to go over everything with you guys, introduce you to the car, and then we'll get driving. This Miata has Flying Miata 17x8 Kogeki wheels. It is on some 235 with Dureza Z3 tires that are pretty much brand new. Thank you to Alec for throwing those on before this review. This has Fly Miata springs and sway bars, and no necessarily coilovers, but these are Coney yellow shocks. We also have a Willwood brake kit. It seems to be a big thing on the Miatas. They were on the ND front and rear that we did, and they are on the front of this NC. We have G-Lock R10 rear pads and the BP20 pads up front on the Willwood kit. We have braided front brake lines, RBF 660 fluid, and a Flying Miata coolant expansion tank. All right, so we are here at Dale the Dragon on a Saturday evening. Perfect weather for a Miata. Now I can immediately tell right off the get-go that this is a little bit wider than that ND that we drove. Now everyone always rags on these things for being boats and being heavy, but it is a 2,300-pound Miata. It's not that heavy. This also comes with those 235 tires like I mentioned, and you can tell that they're there, especially these brake pads as well. I love that every Miata that we've driven so far, granted it's only been two, but these Miatas have Willwood big brake kits up front. With the Miatas I own, I never did big brake kits, and with these two that I've driven now, you can immediately tell going into corners like hard lefts, hard rights, you hit the brakes and it's right there. I don't lose any confidence in the car. Everything is right where I need it to be. I don't feel like there's extended pedal travel. Everything feels exactly as it should. I feel confident in the car, and when you're confident in the car, you're gonna have a better driving experience. But honestly, it's a Miata. How can you not have fun? Unless you're eye to eye with the sun visor. But thankfully for me, Alec has lowered this seat, and it actually sits about half an inch to an inch lower than original. And I can definitely tell because I'm sitting with my back straight up and I can actually see what's in front of me, which is great. Now I can tell, you know, people talk about the NC Miata for having torque, and you can tell that it's there. And what helps that is the longer gearing that an NC has compared to an ND Miata. I can sit in third, and I even talked to Alec prior, and he said even, you know, in highway cruising, it's rare for him to hit fifth because of how long third gear is. Fourth to fifth is a little bit on the short side, but third to fourth, I can put it there and I can be fine. And there's a lot of room for the car to stretch its legs. I can sit at 3,500 RPM and it can carry me into this corner and smack these Willwood brakes. I mean, we're there, man. Now, these Coney shocks, yes, he doesn't have coilovers, but he knows how to dial in a car. And with these springs and these shocks, the car feels extremely planted. Keep in mind, that ND that we drove was also on springs and shocks. The answer isn't smack coilovers on everything and every upper control arm and lower control arm you can buy, and that's your solution. Some cars, like a Miata, that love body travel, appreciate just a good set of shocks, and a good set of springs. Say that 5 times fast. But like I'm in fifth right now, and I genuinely feel like it's too high of a gear for the car. So I really appreciate the longer gearing of this car. I remember being in the ND, I was definitely shifting more, carrying the same amount of speed that I'm carrying now. But man, speaking of carrying speed, this thing just carries it. I have no problem barely tapping those brakes. Those Willwoods obviously help slow everything down, but I have no problem tapping the brakes, slowing the car down, getting it set up. These 235 Dureza Z3s with a proper alignment, I'm not worried about oversteer or understeer. The best thing about a Miata is that it'll oversteer when you want it to, it'll understeer when you want it to if you're trying to scrub speed. But just, oh man. And third carries. If I want to dance with the car a little bit, we can drop it down to the second and, you know, make sure we get a little bit of oversteer if we need. Man, this pedal box. Oh. I think the one thing Miata will always have over an 8.6 is a pedal box. Mazda did a great job designing this pedal box and especially this transmission as well. If you guys are into these Miatas, you'll know that the NC actually has a stronger transmission than the ND Miata. And honestly, I have no complaints with it. The gearing's longer, it's handling everything I'm throwing at it. I mean, this is, if you're trying to cruise, throw it in third. If you want to rip, throw it in second, especially going slower like this. Great job to Sean and Alec. You guys have set your Miatas up so similarly that they make for a phenomenal comparison. I can tell you directly that the ND, it dives into corners and undulates in corners a little bit better. Not saying that the car isn't set up well, but the NC, you can understand why you can fit a 265 on these from factory. They have the same suspension design, but the NC is a little bit better when it comes to rolling into a corner, catching, going through, and ending the corner and moving on to the next one. The ND likes to dance a little bit more. It has that playful feeling that an NA has. And if you've driven both, you definitely understand what I'm talking about. But honestly, these two cars, the torque comes on so similarly. The ND, you can tell because of those higher revs, when it carries that horsepower up, you can feel it up in that higher rev range, almost like an S2000, which is why I compared it to one. This NC almost feels like a very teeny tiny version of a Mustang. You have the torque where you need it. It doesn't push like one, but it just feels less like an NA than an NA Miata. This NC feels like you almost put a supercharger on an NA Miata and widened it a little bit in the arches, which is why people love these cars, because especially if you're like an autocross guy, you can fit stupid wide tires on these from the factory, and the car loves it. You don't upset it. It has those wide arches that the NC2 and NC3 Miata have, and they just absolutely love to grip. Thank you, Mr. Harley, for pulling off. Always greatly appreciated. Thank you, sir. The easiest part of a Miata that I always forget is that it's super easy to wave out at the top. And that's part of what makes them so enjoyable, is that you can just enjoy that open top roadster feeling. If you want to hear me rant and rave about what makes the ND so special as well, you can check that out in the video linked above. But honestly, this ND and this NC that I'm driving now, compared so close, they're set up so well from the factory that it makes for a really good comparison for the finer details, like the longer gearing and the torque. And this is a club, so it has an LSD, and you can tell it's set up so extremely well. Oh, man, the confidence of an LSD in a Miata is staggering. You can feel it do everything you want it to do. Man, it just grips the corners. It's incredible. And it's interesting that Alec did not go with a big brake kit in the rear. And he said that it honestly doesn't really upset the balance of the car having that brake bias up front. And honestly, I completely agree with him. That Willwood kit in the rear from Flying Miata for the ND complemented Sean's ND extremely well. For the NC, you don't really need it. That extra money that you would have spent on a big brake kit, spend it on a track day. You'll be faster, I promise. And I'm getting zero fade out of these pads, man. Oh, this feels incredible. I'm able to understeer to scrub speed and oversteer when I want it. And the car feels so planted. It feels right at home. And like I've always said with the Miata, I mean, it is perfect to just say F you to the brochures and the numbers and enjoy driving. That's what this is about. I can't stop smiling because it's so enjoyable. And I can drive this when we were behind that Harley earlier. I can drive this at 10 miles an hour and I love it. And I can drive it at whatever unnamed speed you want to carry speed with, and it's still enjoyable. These cars are special. And it's like what makes the S2000 so crucial is that you took everything that made a Miata special and and you added sparkles to it, and you get something like the S2000. If you don't want to pay for an S2000, get an ND. If you prefer the torque, if you're autocrossing a good bit on a little bit longer of a course, or if your commute has some tight, windy roads that you just want to pop into third and enjoy, you can grab an NC. Like I said, these carry with torque a lot longer than an ND. An ND, if you want to extract the power, you're going to be above 5,000. It makes good enough torque to put in third and coast around. This makes enough torque to put in third and slide if you need it or want it. Up to you. It's really about what you want. If the transmission problems of the ND scare you and you still want an open-top experience that doesn't feel super dated, just grab one of these. You're going to have just as much fun. Does the ND feel a little bit better on the interior? Yes. But it's going to cost you. If you have the budget for that, by all means go ahead. Like I said, you can pick up one of those NDs for about $25. If you want to spend $10,000 less and grab something like an NC and spend all that extra money on track days because these are so good out of the box, or potentially doing one of these Willwood big brake kits, or anything that you like, it's Miata. The aftermarket goes for forever. If you're a little bit more budget friendly, I definitely look towards the NC. You're gonna have just as much fun. Is it a little bit more dated? Yes. I'm not gonna sit here and say that everything's perfect all the time, but it's a Miata. You can't go wrong with it. If you guys like this Miata review, definitely check out that ND review that I linked earlier. I'll go ahead and put it up now. Thank you guys for sticking around for that one. That was an absolute blast. Thank you to Alec for his NC Miata. That was truly enjoyable. If you guys like this review, be sure to check out our other Miata review, as well as some of the other reviews that we have. And as always, I greatly appreciate your time, and we will see you in the next video.